Okay, right. Oh gosh, I'm just moving along here. I can't believe this is my last hour, you guys. This is crazy. Let me get let's see, let me get your stuff up and get Ricky's down. I've got too many little things here. Okay, so for Jason, we're going to put up his Instagram and his Twitter so you guys can follow him on social media. That's the only thing I had, right, that you gave me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not missing anything. All right, so everybody welcome Jason Strong. And again, I do not know, I can't see the names, but you guys can see the names you said, right? But it's pretty easy to remember. It's up there on his on his socials. So welcome Jason to the not podcast. Oh my gosh, the YouTube stream. You can tell I've been on here for 3 hours. All right.
All good.
I'm already losing my mind. I'm going crazy here. All right. So Ricky, now your case is you're another exoneree, like we just talked to Ricky, and you were in prison for how many years? 15 years?
15 and a half, yeah.
And you were released how long ago?
It'll be 5 years on May 28th.
Okay. So where I want to start is obviously kind of at the beginning of what the crime was, how you became a suspect, how did you get involved in this, what led to your arrest, and in your case, something that I know we talked about and I wanted you to talk about was the fact that you actually falsely confessed.
Right.
And you did this at 24 years old. So, we're dealing with Brendan, who was only 15, years old at the time. At the time of the crime, and you were 24 years old and you still falsely confessed. So I would really like you to spend some time talking about that, like what happened, what led to that, what the mindset is, and you've done these things before, you've done that kind of stuff, so but start with the crime itself.
All right, yeah. So I was arrested in December of '99 for 2 counts of first-degree murder. What had happened is they had found an unidentified woman's body in a forest preserve who had been badly beaten and tortured. And they started an investigation, got nowhere, countless leads. And eventually they came knocking on my door, and I'll get to that in a minute, why they came to my door. But on around December 19th, December 20th, it was about 11 o'clock at night. I was hanging out in my room with my girlfriend and her friend. We were drinking, having a few, smokes and things like that. And I get a knock at the door. I think it's just my buddy from down the way. Open the door. It's a bunch of cops with guns drawn. They push into my room, throw me down, handcuff me. My girlfriend's screaming and crying. I'm confused. I don't know what the fuck is going on. And they're not telling me anything. They put me in a car. They take me to the station. The whole time, I'm just constantly like, what the fuck is going on? Why are y'all doing this? I didn't do anything wrong. And that's, the initial start of what leads to false confessions is you're confused, you're scared, you're anxious, you have no idea why this is happening to you. And nobody's talking to you, nobody's helping you. And they put you in a room. And the conveyor belt system starts, which is basically where they, have a couple cops come in and then they'll leave, and a couple other cops come in and they'll leave, and then the first 2 come back, and just back and forth. And when you're an innocent person, your first inclination is, I want to talk to the police. I didn't do anything wrong. What can I do to help resolve this? And so you're like, hey, yeah, I'll cooperate. It's not until about 40 minutes to an hour later, you realize they're not your friend. They're not there to help you. They're not listening to you. They don't care what you have to say. They only want their own way. That you realize you're fucked and it's too late. And what I mean by that is the moment you go in there, you sign a paper that says you're willing to talk to them. They make you think that once you sign that paper, you no longer have rights, because once shit goes south and you say, I want a lawyer, their first response is you can't afford one. So you can't have one. All right. And you're not thinking rationally. You're not thinking, well, wait a minute, my rights are this and my rights are that. You're just like, what the fuck is going on here? And I apologize to everybody if my language offends them, but that's how I talk. But anyway.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
So, you're sitting there and you got these cops, they're showing you pictures of this woman's body, autopsy photos, photos of where she was found. And I mean, these are horrific pictures, you know, these are, you know, grotesque injuries that were done to this woman, you know, just pictures of a dead body in general are just, it's weird, you know, it messes with your head. And they're accusing you of this crime, and you're constantly telling them, I didn't do anything, to the point where you finally get mad and you're like, look, I didn't fucking do anything. I didn't do this. Why the fuck won't you listen to me? And they say that that's evidence of your guilt. You're showing your anger, your aggressive, violent nature. And this goes on for a long time, and then you eventually get to a point where you feel helpless and you start to cry, and you feel like you have no options and they're not listening to you. And they say, well, that's proof of your guilt, because now you're showing remorse for your actions. Everything you do in that room is designed to be against you. If you avoid eye contact, you're guilty. If you make eye contact, you're guilty. If you talk, you're guilty. If you don't talk, you're guilty. If, you know, whatever you do is a sign of guilt. They bring you statements from your friends that they've coerced to say that you did this crime. They threaten to charge your girlfriend with the crime as well. They do everything in their power to make you feel like you have no other option. They won't let you sleep. Every time they'd leave and I'd lay my head down to rest, they'd come right back in and start on me again. They lie and say they have evidence that you know isn't possible. But by this point, you're so confused and scared, you don't realize what's reality anymore. And your only option, your only way to make it quit is to give them what they want. And you're not thinking like, oh, this will never help. This will never hurt. This will never, you're just, how do I make this stop? You're not thinking to the next stage. You just want it to end, because it's endless and it's horrible to go through. And most people think, oh, I would never do this. I would never confess to a crime I didn't commit. Well, you know, sit in that room for a long time like I did and go through the grilling tactics that they use. And I guarantee you, eventually you will break. Some people, it's quicker than others. Some people, it takes a while, but everybody's got a breaking point. And that's what they're trained to do, is get confessions from people. And it's not like you can just say, hey, you know what? Fuck you guys, I'm done, I'm going home. They're not gonna let you leave. You're there, end of story. So best thing that you can do is the moment you're in their custody, shut up and just say, I want a lawyer. Never try to talk to them, because they're not your friend, even if you didn't do anything wrong.
So how long were you actually in interrogation?
It went from probably about 11:30, midnight, somewhere around there. Probably till about, I don't know, 6:30 in the morning before I finally broke. I was just exhausted. I was drained of energy. You know, so the night before I got arrested, I probably had maybe, I don't know, 4 hours sleep the previous 48 hours. Between, you know, working, spending time with my girlfriend. I like to party a lot too. Then add on top of that, before I get arrested, I'm drinking, I'm smoking weed. You know, I'm not in the perfect frame of mind, and I'm exhausted. And they won't let you sleep, like I said. You know, once it was over, just to give you an idea of how exhausted and mentally and emotionally drained I was, all I did as soon as they left me alone was lay on the floor and go to sleep. Because I was just, that's how gone I was at that moment. I couldn't do anything, and my body was just drained. But that's what they do. They you know, they work on you and they work on you until you're on your last leg. You know, and they know what your weaknesses are. You know, in my case, you know, they kept saying, you know, they heard me kept asking about my girlfriend, because I was arrested with her there. So they knew she was a weakness for me. So they used that by saying, well, we think she's involved too. We're going to threaten her, or we're going to charge her as well, you know, to try to get you to defend her, you know, which I did. And, you know, end up signing the confession for something I didn't do. But why they came to get me in the first place is something people often ask. Well, how did they even find you? Well, so I wasn't a saint. I never hurt anybody, but I lived a rock and roll lifestyle. You know, I partied a lot, drank, did drugs, worked in a porn shop, but I wasn't a bad person. But be that as it may, there was a particular cop that headed in for me, and he had been harassing me for a long time, wanting me to be a snitch for him. And I've told him numerous times, I don't know nothing. I don't know anything about drugs. I don't know anybody about dealing drugs. I can't help you. And he told me if I didn't cooperate with him, he would make my life a living hell. And shortly after that moment, he made that a reality. He was the initiating officer that arrested my co-defendant, who I didn't even know on the night in question. And he's the one that intimidated, crushed the guy's hand in a car door, and intimidated him and threatened him until he basically said that he saw me commit this crime. And then that's when they came and arrested me.
You know, which
Years later,
which one of the other guys was that? That was, let's see.
Oh, that was a Jeremy Tweedy.
Oh, Jeremy
So
Tweedy, and then the other one was
met,
Jason Johnson. Okay.
Right. I knew Jason Johnson for a long time, but Tweedy I had actually met after the night in question. The body was found on December 8th. I met Jeremy Tweedy like around, I don't know, like December 14th or something like that. So, but they made it look like I knew him for a long period of time to fit their scenario. But years later, when he recanted, I found out that once they got into the station, all they talked about was me. This cop kept saying, you know, tell us about Jason Strong. What did Jason Strong have to do with this? What do you know about Jason Strong? We want to know what his actions were that night. So he got to the point where this guy's like, I don't fucking know this guy, but that's who they want. I'll give him to him. And he saved his own ass that way. So, you know, that's basically how they came to find me. This one cop had it in for me. He intimidated somebody else to point me out as the guy. And then they came and arrested me and interrogated me until I caved. My friend Jason Johnson also falsely confessed under the influence of narcotics as well and lack of sleep. But he refused to testify against me. He knew that his shit was bogus. And, you know, we both immediately said, you know, none of this is true. We didn't do anything wrong. And we stood for our innocence right from the jump.
So now what actually was the crime? Like, what happened to this woman?
So
she was unidentified. You already said that, right? So
right. The theory from the state presented at trial was that me and my friends picked this woman up who was walking down the road, and we took her to my place and partied with her and beat her and tortured her and then dumped her body. What really happened, of course, we didn't find out for many years. I was actually in prison for 7 years before we even identified the victim.
Right.
As weird as that is. But shortly after that, we found out a lot of interesting things. And so while justice will never be found for this woman, unfortunately, what we discovered was that she was a mentally handicapped woman who was living on her own, but her family kept tabs on her. And she came under the influence of a grifter team, a mother and daughter grifter team that had a history of taking advantage of elderly and handicapped people, mentally disabled people, things of that nature. They would extort them for their money and abuse them. And they took her away from her home. And so just bear with me for a second. The state theorized that me and my friends did all this in one night. Okay. What actually happened is these women took this poor woman from her home back in April of '99. And the last her family heard from her in April of '99, she told them, they don't want me to talk to you. And they never heard from her again. And later, of course, we find out that, you know, they'd been keeping her and holding her and torturing her. They sold her to this other man who was also mentally disabled and handicapped. This guy they convinced to lay down on a set of railroad tracks and have his arm cut off by a train so that he could sue the state and get money. And then they sold her to him for the money. And then they kept both of them where they could torture her and extort money from her bank account. The only reason we know that is because a year after she was dead and I was being convicted of murdering her, they must have figured they got away with it because the daughter of the grifter team went and posed as the victim's sister to try to get access to her bank accounts because nobody knew she was dead. So her bank accounts were still active. But thankfully, the bank remembered her and knew her family and knew that that wasn't her family and called the cops right away, which started a missing persons investigation. It took them many years, as I said, before they made the connection between the two counties. So yeah, she basically they beat her and tortured her and deprived her of nutrition. And we know this now because medical examiners, proper ones, not the fraud that was in my trial, found that she had actually been tortured for many, many weeks, if not months, because all the injuries that were similar were in various stages of healing. And further, the injuries that led to her death were actually, the day she was found, it wasn't from the night before. She was actually dead up to a week prior to that, but she didn't decompose. She didn't decompose because of the cooler temperatures, right? And the injuries that led to that were even further back than that. So it threw out the state's entire theory that me and my buddies picked her up on the side of the road, partied with her, and killed her in one night.
What did the forensic pathologist, using that term loosely, at the trial say?
Oh, he basically corroborated everything that my co-defendant had said, that we killed this woman in one night. The injuries match everything that we had said in our confessions. He even he added things, said that there was wax burnings, that we had melted wax and burned her with it because we were into like all kinds of kinky shit. And come to find out, she'd never even been burned. There was no wax on her. Later on, real pathologists determined that what he thought was burnings and wax and all this was actually signs of decomposition that had started. The sloughing of the skin, the discoloration, things like that were normal to decomposition. But and this wasn't just one forensic pathologist that came to that conclusion. It was 3 of them, and their stuff was peer reviewed. So then they all came to the same conclusions, that it wasn't possible for us to have committed this crime. But the pathologist in my trial that sat in and gave all this evidence corroborating these false confessions turned out to be a fraud. During my, this is what my attorneys told me. I wasn't in the room, but during my civil suit, they deposed him and determined that he never went to medical school for this in the United States. He went to some fly-by-night institution in the Dominican Republic that was closed down for fraudulent practices, never had a license to practice, and he's been doing this for how long? And he's still doing it. He just moved to a different state, unfortunately, Wisconsin.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
So, insane. I mean, my friend Jason Flom jokes that, Quentin Tarantino couldn't write this shit. It's so crazy, but you got one-armed crazy people and, railroad tracks and fraudulent medical examiners and, grifters. I mean, it's just insanity.
That's just crazy. Where in Wisconsin is he? Do you know?
I believe Racine.
Right over the border. So, wow,
Yeah.
that is just crazy. So I'm going to read this because I don't want to keep holding my iPad, but this is one thing, and I don't know where we want to put this in the story, but I'm reading it now because this is disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. And this is the quote. You're not going to know what I'm going to say. The quote from the assistant state's attorney after she was identified.
Mm-hmm.
So Assistant State Attorney Michael Morell, is that how you say his name?
Morell. Yeah.
Okay, he was the prosecutor on this case. And he was asked why the state did not reopen the case after she was Sunderland. That's her name. Mary Kate? Yeah, Mary Kate Sunderland. Yeah. After she was identified, he was asked why they didn't reopen the case. And this was what he said. He said, her identity had nothing to do with who killed her, how she was killed, or what happened. Jason Strong confessed to her murder and showed police where he dumped the body. So explain to me what difference it makes who she was. The taxpayers don't pay us for intellectual curiosity. They pay us to get convictions.
Yeah.
That's a real great attitude for a prosecutor.
Oh, yeah. Mike Morell was, he's a real piece of work. He was basically allowed to retire, but he was getting a lot of bad press because numerous cases were falling apart. He made that comment in my case. In the Juan Rivera case, for those that aren't familiar, Juan Rivera, same county, same prosecutor, cops, everything. He was wrongfully convicted for the rape and murder of an 11-year-old girl, Holly Staker. And he did 20 plus years in prison for something he didn't do. Tried 3 times and convicted. And then DNA came out and proved it wasn't him. This prosecutor, Mike Morell, his response to that was, well, maybe she had sex with somebody else earlier in the day before Juan came along and killed her.
Right.
So now he's blaming the victim, an 11-year-old girl.
11-year-old girl.
Which if I was the parents of that kid, I'd be outraged. I can only imagine.
And it wasn't even so much about her having sex with somebody else. There was like this magic semen or something that could supposedly float from like one, from a bedspread or something like that. I don't know. He came up with this.
Oh no, that was the other case.
That was the other case. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's multiple cases here. So
Jesus.
Jerry Hobbs was another case. He sat in jail for 5 years awaiting trial before he was released. He was in there for the murder of his 9-year-old daughter and her friend.
Right, that's the one.
And they found semen inside these girls. And when the DNA didn't match, his explanation was, well, maybe they were playing in a part of the park where people go to have sex, and they got the semen inside of them from there. Well, how the fuck does that happen? I mean, were they taking their clothes off and rolling around in the dirt at 9? I mean, come on, it's insane explanations like that are why he was pushed out.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm glad. I mean, it is just ridiculous. But the problem is, juries were buying this crap. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, it's sad, but juries, people that sit on juries are made up of our general society, and unfortunately, most people in society believe the shit they see on TV from your talking head pundits, from your shows like Law and Order and all these. And that's where they get their sense of justice. And they also follow into this, we got to be tough on crime, and cops are the good guys. And, yeah, I get that. Cops do good work sometimes, but there are bad cops too. And they make mistakes. Some of them do it on purpose, deliberately railroad people. And there's mistakes and evil assholes that are prosecutors as well. But for some reason, the general public fails to see that a lot of the times. They want to believe that those cops are doing good. They want to believe that the prosecutor's just looking out for them. So that's where the real challenge comes in. When we do what we're doing right now, most of the time we end up preaching to the choir. Most people that are watching are probably people that are already familiar with this and care about the cause. The hard part is reaching those people that have no clue, that never stop to think about this stuff, that have never been impacted by it. Those are the people whose hearts and minds we have to change. And that's the struggle. So, when you look at juries, you got to remember that those people that probably have never had any knowledge about this kind of stuff, and it's on purpose. When you're doing voir dire in your jury selection, they're basically asking people, hey, do you know anybody that's in the criminal justice system? Have you ever had an experience? And if they have, they're gone. They don't want those people to sit up. They don't want people that are going to think and use evidence in the right way. They want people that will react emotionally. And it's become a game, a challenge between sides to see who can, stack the deck in their favor. And it's terrible. That's something we really need to work on as a people to fix, because injustice doesn't know color, sex, wealth, poverty. It doesn't know any of that. All injustice knows is, injustice. It can happen to anybody. It can happen to your next door neighbor. It can happen to your brother. It can happen to your friend.
Now, in 2002, because this is what they said, that she found out she had a husband that she had been married to, that she met through these con women. Mm-hmm. In 2002, he actually confessed to the crime, correct?
Right.
But they went to look for the body, right? Okay, I'll let you tell it.
Okay, so Gonzalo Chamizo was the guy that they sold her to and she was married to. And when they had the missing persons report started, they found him, and he was in a mental institution / jail. He was crazy. He was deranged, insane. When they went and talked to him, they were talking to him about a missing person. But the whole time, he was adamant that she was dead, and not just dead, but that she was murdered, and that him and these two women had done it. But he gave constant variations in what actually happened, so they didn't believe him. The only thing that really was 100% was that she was murdered in December of '99, and that these people were involved. He was constant about that. But all the other details were wrong. So when they went to the place where he said the body was buried, they didn't find anything, and they just chalked it up to he was crazy. Another note is that during the interview, interrogation, whatever you want to call it, that they did with him, to give you an example of how crazy he was physically, literally masturbating and playing with his feces in the room with the police officers.
Oh, God.
The man is not all there. He's gone. And so, you know, that also explains how these women were able to take advantage of him as well. So yeah, he gave a lot of conflicting things, but the things that stood out to us that were in the know of what the case was that he kept saying she was murdered in December of '99. That's not stuff people guess.
Right.
You know.
Now,
So,
when he sent them to go, when he told them where the body was he correct? And it's just that they didn't know the body had already been found and removed? Like, did he give the right location?
No, he wasn't even close.
Okay.
And he constantly changed that. One day it was that she was in a dumpster. The other day, another time that she was buried in somebody's yard. It was constantly changing. And that's why they didn't really, believe him much. They went and checked, nothing turned up, so they just marked it off as he was crazy. But when I read the reports, years later, when we finally made the connection between the two, I was like, the thing that stood out to me, again, he kept saying December '99 murder. That's, they were asking about a missing persons, but he was adamant she was murdered in December of '99. And
now
the county that, I'm sorry, I was just going to say the county where the missing person investigation was, once the connection was made, we reached out to them, and there was an officer there, Sergeant Bosshart, who was amazing. When I say there's good cops out there too that do good work, he's one of them. He was very helpful. He talked to me and my family. He gave us case information because he didn't believe it was me. He thought Lake County had the wrong guy. And when he went to talk to Lake County to ask them about the case and try to compare notes, they pushed him out. They didn't want anything to do with him. They didn't want the truth to come out. And ironically, that's also the first time I ever got hate mail, which I think came from the cops, but I can't prove that. Yeah, so that guy was actually trying to reveal the truth, and he gave us all kinds of information about the case that helped us learn more about this mother-daughter team and Chamizo and the victim and everything.
So now we heard from Doreen earlier about how a conviction review unit didn't help John, but in your case, in conviction integrity unit did help you, correct?
Right. To a degree. So, all right, so when they got rid of Morell, Mike Nerheim, who is the current state's attorney for Lake County, Illinois, came into office elected on the platform of change, because he wanted to come in and look at different cases that are claiming innocence and review them and see if there's something really to this. And my case was one of the ones that he was interested in. And so one of my attorneys, Judy Royal at Northwestern, she reached out to him, and they started a rapport and started talking, and he worked closely with us. And this was right around the same time that I was in federal court, and all this information had already come out about who the victim was. And so basically we had a bunch of different angles come together at the same exact moment. It was almost perfect timing. We're in federal court, all this new information comes out. Mike Nerheim is talking to us, and then at the same time, the Attorney General's office reaches out to us and says, hey, let's all sit down and talk about this. And so my attorneys, the Attorney General's people, Mike Nerheim and his people, we all get together, and well, I didn't, but they did. And They all discussed this and said, you know what, let's reinvestigate this case and find out what really happened. And they all got their own independent pathologists, and they all evaluated all this evidence, and they all worked together, and it came back that I didn't commit this crime. And so the Attorney General's office and the state's attorney's office signed off on agreeing to let me go. And the judge, the federal judge, Matthew Kennelly, amazing person, signed the order vacating my conviction and letting me go.
Wow. So how long did that take from the time time they reopened the investigation till when your conviction was overturned? How long did that take?
Oh, wow. That was still, let's see, probably a good 4 years.
Okay, so it took some time.
Yeah, it's not the legal process moves very, very, very slowly.
Right.
I mean, you're constantly filing motions, you're asking for, more time, things are getting delayed, you have to wait for tests to be done. It's a lot. Waiting can be a very grueling process. You learn patience when it comes to those things because it doesn't happen quickly. Obviously, from the moment Northwestern got involved, it still took another 8 years for me to be released. I mean, it's not easy.
Right,
and I was lucky because I didn't have a DNA case,
right.
And that's something I want to point out too. All these people that sit on juries, they always, they're looking for that smoking gun, that DNA, because they see it on CSI and all that shit. And what they don't realize is that the large majority of cases do not have DNA involved. That's, it's mostly shit you see on TV 90% of the time. It's not to say that it doesn't exist. There are DNA cases, and DNA is very helpful, but it's not in the majority of cases. And it wasn't in my case. I got very lucky that I had the team that I had, the evidence that came out, and the people on the other side that were willing to listen. And I had a great judge. So, I had a lot of good things that fell in my favor. Otherwise, I could still very likely be sitting in prison right now.
Like Ricky's case also was not a DNA case, and neither is John Juca's. So, and neither is Steve's. Really, I mean, not where it can be provable. I mean, there's DNA involved in the actual investigation, but there's nothing that can be disproven. Steve's first conviction was overturned because of DNA. They were able to prove that he did not commit the rape. The DNA did not match, whatever. Or they match it to somebody else. That's how his conviction was overturned the first time. They don't have that this time to work with. So, right. Yeah, so that's why I'm always interested in cases that are non-DNA cases because, those cases a little more cut and dry. It's a little bit harder when you have to try to find these constitutional violations and civil rights violations, and it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to win on those cases. So,
well, it's also interesting little fact too is when they were when I was on trial, I used to think, where is the DNA? Why can't we test for DNA? Because when I was on trial, their whole theory was all this happened in my residence and the body was transported in my vehicle. And this is a crime that would have had a lot of blood. This woman was injured very badly, and she would have bled profusely. But yet there's not a single shred of blood, hair, skin, anything in my residence or my vehicle. And they're like, oh, well, he just cleaned everything so perfectly. Okay, so I'm a mad genius that can clean everything perfectly, but then still get caught? Because one of their other theories was that they coerced an ex-girlfriend of mine to say that the victim's clothing that she was found in was mine. And I'm like, so, okay, now you're saying that I'm a mad genius that can get rid of all evidence whatsoever, blood, hair, everything, but yet I would put my own clothing on the victim? Why wouldn't I put her clothing on her? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Just the whole case was nonsense. But why did the jury convict me? Well, and I've said this before, and people are always surprised to hear it, but if I was on my jury, I would have convicted me. I had no defense attorneys. My defense attorneys basically did the state's job for them.
That seems to be a common thread as well.
I didn't know what I could do or what I couldn't do. But today, I could have tried my case better than those guys. I mean, but they went in there and basically said my confession was true. but it wasn't me. It was my co-defendant that actually did it. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work. I don't want to do that. And they're like, well, we know what's best. And they went and did what they wanted to do anyway. And I didn't know what I could do at that point. I didn't have money to buy an attorney, So what was I supposed to do? And so I wrote it out and lost. Went to prison, sentenced to 46 years, and started fighting on my own. We finally scraped together some money to get an attorney for a short time, but once the money ran out, so did he. And I became my own attorney for many years.
And I know we talked about this, but everybody in the chat right away is sitting there like, well, that sounds familiar. Yep, because that's exactly the same thing with Steve, and we talked about that already. But it was like, yeah, he has to be a mastermind to be able to clean up all of that evidence when they supposedly slit her throat and they stabbed her in the stomach and they cut her hair and they did all that stuff, and yet there's not a single shred of DNA anywhere. Let's see, I just saw Linda's comment that was funny. Here, I'll put it up there. You can read it. She said, "Oh my, you and Steve can open the crime cleanup, best in the land world."
Yeah, I mean, that's how they would think it. But the irony is that for all the ways they talked about how clean I made the place, I mean, I was a bachelor, man. I didn't have the cleanest place in the world. I had dishes in the sink and beer bottles everywhere, and I mean, come on.
Funny you say that, because right before you said that, one of my moderators, Julie, she said they cleaned it up and they managed to put the dust back. Because for
Right.
Steve, yeah, you can see the dust. It's like, oh, he cleaned up so great, but he managed to put the dust back afterward. Yeah. So same thing. He was a bachelor at the time because his girlfriend actually was in jail, county lockup at the time. And so yeah, same thing. It's like anybody that looked at his trailer, it was not tidy. It was not super clean, and yet they claim that he cleaned up everything. And
Right.
yeah, it's so ridiculous when they say things like that. Now, you were actually, okay, so first you actually ended up being represented by the Blue Legal Clinic, right? The Center on
Wrongful Convictions. Yeah, that didn't happen until around 2007, 2008. After I was already incarcerated for about 7-8 years.
Okay. Because obviously, they work with Brendan. They're Brendan's attorneys for the wrongful conviction of youth. Yeah, that area.
Right.
So
yeah, Steve and Laura.
yeah. And now you were granted a certificate of innocence, though, right? You had to get a certificate. Correct. Okay.
Yeah, that took about another year after I got out.
Okay. Let me see what else. Is the case still open? Did they arrest these people? Did they find them?
No, so that'll probably never happen.
That's what Ricky was saying in his case too.
Here's a sad reality: is that Gonzalo Chamizo obviously is mentally gone. There's no possibility he could ever stand trial. The mother-daughter team, the mother of them has passed on, and so the only person left is the daughter, and she's a career criminal. She knows the game. I mean, when they deposed her during the reinvestigation of everything, her answer to every question, including where were you born, when were you born, how old are you, is I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And when she got up to go to the bathroom, she would take her drink and everything with her, so they couldn't take fingerprints from her or DNA or anything. She knows the game. So all she would have to do, if they ever brought her in, and say, "Oh, it wasn't me. It was this other guy and my mom." And who would prove her wrong? Right. Not to mention the cops. They're never going to admit they were wrong. They're not going to want to go and investigate this. They've never once admitted that they were wrong, and they never will. So who's going to investigate it? Right, exactly. And I said, Ricky's case, it's actually like they know the people confessed, and they actually confessed to doing it and everything, and yet they're still probably never going to be prosecuted either, which is just sad because these are people that are cold-blooded murderers. One thing I do want to do is, we got to start holding the cops accountable. That's part of the problem too. That's another point. But one thing I am trying to do is get some investigative journalism into that fraudulent medical examiner, so that he doesn't get to continue fucking up people's cases. Right. Because I can't imagine how many cases that man has sat on and contaminated. And he gets to still do it. He just left and went to a different state. That's just ridiculous. That's scary.
Let's see, I've got some questions here. So Jamie, oh, here, I'll put it up here. Jamie says, in Jason's specific situation, upon getting exonerated, was employment still hard to find?
Yes and no. So you're always going to have a hard time, because even if you prove your innocence, you still have to explain why you got a 15-year gap in your work history. You know, you gotta tell them you were in prison at the end of the day. But also, it was hard for me because when I first got out, I ran the risk of almost creating my own prison at home. I wasn't used to the world. You know, I didn't understand modern technology and the way people thought and acted. I had no commonality with people. You know, I had my life ripped apart twice. I lost all my friends in my life when I went to prison, but you have no choice but to make connections and friends in prison. So when I left, I lost all my friends again. And so I'm out here at 39 years old, and I'm like, well, how do I rebuild my life? I don't know how to make friends. I don't have skills to get a good job. And another thing that was always on the top of my mind is I didn't know if I could have just any kind of a job. You know, flipping burgers at a McDonald's wasn't going to work for me, because, you know, prison does something to the way you think. And I didn't think that I had the ability to tolerate certain kinds of disrespect from people. And all it would take is one person to talk out the side of their neck or get out of pocket with me, and I would probably lose my cool, and then I would lose my job. So that's not a good thing. And it bled, but it took me a long time to get to where I finally pushed myself out of my comfort zone and decided to go out and venture into the world. You know, I was very content to just stay home and play video games and listen to music, but I couldn't do that. I had to push myself. And so I eventually did, and I met some great friends, started working at the, well, not working, but doing, learning a lot, working with the studio, NECAT studio in Nashville, which is a public access television station. So I could learn how to make productions and put things on TV and things like that. And I met some great people there. And through those people, I met this guy who gave me a job temporarily. And one of my first jobs was actually to paint at Jack White's house. I worked on his tennis court, and I worked on his basement. And so, I mean, as far as first jobs go, that's a pretty cool one. But now I just I work on a lot of different things. I work with the Innocence Projects a lot. I work in film. I was a wrongful conviction consultant for the show Proven Innocent, which was on Fox. Unfortunately, only lasted a season. I work on a lot of different things, but I don't have like a regular day job type thing. You know, I want a civil suit. I'm invested. I'm looking at businesses to invest in as well. So I do well, but I try to do my part to work in the cause, as well as, you know, look after dreams that I've always had, you know, working with people in music and film and things like that. I hope I answered your question,
yeah,
Jamie.
No, it's great. Thank you for answering. Jamie said thank you for answering too. I've got to find it. Too many people are talking. I got to go all the way back to find it to take it off the screen again. Let me see what else being said here. Now, I wasn't going to bring it up because I figure it's kind of personal, but you don't have to talk about the amount or anything. But you said you did win a federal civil rights suit, correct?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I don't talk about it too much because
right. That's why I wasn't going to bring it up, but you just mentioned it, so I was like, well, I'm just not going to talk about the amount or anything like that. But you were able to win you did file a suit against them, and you did win a federal civil rights suit.
Well, we settled, but at the end of the day, it doesn't replace what was taken from me.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if any amount could, but I settled because I'm smart enough to know how to invest, and I wanted to be out from under their thumb, because while the suit was going on, you know, my lawyers were like, look, you can't do this, you can't do that. We don't want you on social media. We don't want you to write a book. We don't want you to do any movies or stories about yourself. You know, I was like I was still being controlled. And I didn't
Wow.
want that. I wanted to be free. I was done
Right.
with them. And so I settled because I felt like what they gave, even though I didn't think it was enough, it was enough to make my life comfortable. And I could do the things that I wanted to do and pursue the dreams that I wanted to pursue. So,
Nice.
and it put it behind me. So now I can live my life and I have to worry about, are they going to read my emails? Are they going to monitor my texts? Are they going to look at my Instagram page and say, oh, why does he listen to this kind of music? Because, you know, that's how they attacked me in the beginning too, was, you know, oh, here's a guy who works in a porn shop and has long hair, because I used to have hair. And, you know, he has long hair and tattoos, and he drinks and does drugs, and he listens to rock and roll music. He's got to be guilty. And it's like, you know, none of that shit makes you guilty of anything, man. You know, that's part of being alive, is the having the right to be who you want to be and have differences in our lives. You know, that's the spice of life, right? It's variety. So, you know, just because somebody likes things that are different from you doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that they're guilty of anything.
Let me see what else we got going on here. I was supposed to tell you that I know I saw Marty Tankliff in here earlier, and then Christina's in here too, Adam's sister. So,
Yep, good people.
yep, I'm just letting you know. I know you got some of your friends in here. I don't know if there were more that I haven't seen. Let's see. Someone wants to know if you can tell us the name of the cop who did this to you. I don't know.
You
The
know,
one that interrogated? I'm
I'd
assuming the one
rather
that did the
not.
interrogation. You'd rather not say?
Yeah, well, the interrogations were a bunch of different cops. The one that had it in for me didn't do the interrogation on me.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather not mention his name right now, just because I don't, you know, want to cause an issue where, you know, he might try to sue me or something.
Right, that's
But
perfectly fine. That is your
so,
business.
but you know, the cops that interrogated me was it was 4 different cops, and they just kept kind of switching off. And then, of course, see how much time we got. Okay, I'll try to squeeze this in the minute. You know, one of the other little added weird things about this case was I didn't just get interrogated.
That's Doreen. Oh, sorry, that was Doreen. That was Doreen that asked that question. I didn't know that was you.
Oh, well, her and I can talk about that on another.
Yeah, you can ask him privately.
But yeah, I actually got interrogated for 2 different crimes that night. That's another thing that a lot of people don't realize. So not only were they interrogating me about this Jane Doe that was found in Illinois, but there was a Jane Doe case in Racine, Wisconsin, that they thought were similar, and they thought they were connected. So they came down the same fucking night and interrogated me for that one too. I didn't confess to that one. By that point, I was just like, man, fuck you guys. You guys, I can't do it anymore. And I just fucking broke. But I was their main suspect for many, many, many years. They never pursued anything because obviously I was in custody already. But it wasn't until my case started to fall apart that they stopped mentioning me in their stories. And on a bit of a good note, they recently solved their case. And it's interesting because who it turned out to be, you want to talk about irony, it was a woman who was a medical person, just like the grifters. They worked in the medical field, and they would take advantage of their patients and things like that. Well, this woman took this also handicapped woman into her home, tortured her for years, and forced her to take care of her family. And her family never said anything about it. And the way they caught her was when she apparently had moved to Florida, and I don't know if she threatened another person or just said something in passing, but a woman called the police and said that this woman stated she killed a woman in Racine. And they came to investigate it, and the woman confessed. And her husband and her children all said that it was true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, it just gets weirder and weirder, right?
Yeah, it seems like most of these cases do. You know, it's just like you keep thinking, because you say, you know, it's truth is stranger than fiction. It always is.
Yep.
Let's see. Do we have any other questions, you guys, for Jason? This is so funny because Jason and I actually talked for like 90 minutes the other day. It's like, and now it's like an hour. I'm like, boy, we went through that fast.
Yeah, that's usually how it happens, though. That's why sometimes if I'm not careful, I can just go on rambling and be like, oh shit, I didn't even talk about this or
And I
this.
was fine because I could have kept going with you, but we were like, oh, we should probably wrap this up now. So we have something to talk about on Saturday. So are there
Yeah,
any
all
other
good.
questions? I've had a
Well,
pretty,
you
I
know,
mean, a pretty consistent viewership this entire time.
that's
Tell that.
cool.
Oh, okay. Doreen says, tell them how you met Doreen.
Well, shit, I met her the first time was in, where the fuck was it, Atlanta or Memphis? Memphis, I think it was. I
She's
don't
saying,
remember now, but I know that Doreen and we met at a conference, which was very cool. But my memory of meeting Doreen for real was when I was in New York and we hung out at Coney Island.
that's what she's
That was
saying.
a
Yeah.
great day. Yeah, that was a great day. It was me, her, and Anthony DePippo,
Yep.
and that was just good times, man.
That's what she just said.
Doreen's good people.
Yeah, she is. She's, I said she's a force. She's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. And I would just want to add, for any people that view this too, that get involved. Even if it doesn't affect you right now, it doesn't matter. It's the right thing to do. We should all be vigilant and stand up against injustice because, if we don't, tomorrow it could be you. And then where are the people that will support you? We have to stand together on these things. As humans, it's our duty to stand for what's right and to stand up against injustice and to protect those that need protecting. So I think it's important for people to get involved. Look into the Innocence Network. Look into whatever innocence projects are in your state. If you're here in Tennessee, look at the Tennessee Innocence Project. We're new. I'm on the advisory council there. We need a lot of help and support to keep running because it costs a lot of money to fight these cases, and we're just now getting off the ground. So we could really use some support. But mainly, even if you don't look at us or support us, just get involved and care about the issue. Learn about it and don't be afraid to talk about it. If you hear people talking about a case or talking about whatever legal anything, step in and join the conversation and be a voice for justice.
Yeah, one of the slogans, Susan just put in the chat, one of the slogans that a lot of us use in this with the making a murder cases is we all live on Avery Road. We say that, and it's basically saying that, yeah, because it could happen to any of us. That's like it happened to Steve, it happened to Brendan, it happened to you, but it could happen to anybody.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter what your sex is. It doesn't matter what your stature money-wise is. I mean,
right.
There are people that there was even a prosecutor, I can't think of his name right now, but there was even a prosecutor that was wrongfully convicted of a crime. I mean, it can happen to anybody.
I think you told me about that because that sounds familiar. Did you tell me about that?
I don't recall if we discussed it or not.
Yeah, it sounds familiar though. Yeah.
But I mean, it happens. I mean, there's people that have, gone to college and have doctorates and make great money that it happens to. There's people that were on their way to careers that it happens to. I mean, there's one of our brothers, Jimmy Gardner. He was signed to the Cubs, and his life was upended. I mean, it just happens. It doesn't know anything about, like I said, race, gender, any of that. It just happens to people.
Right.
And it's terrible. So we should all care about this issue. Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We all have to be vigilant,
Absolutely.
like I said.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes. So, okay,
yeah,
I don't think we have any more questions. Go ahead. What?
Well, I was just going to say that's probably one of his more well-known ones, I think.
Yeah, and especially people that are that are into the true crime cases and follow wrongful conviction cases. Obviously, we see that a lot, but it is, it's true. I mean, it's simple but true. So yeah, I think that I don't think there's any more questions really. You'll catch up with Doreen and you can answer her questions. And but thank you again for coming on. If you ever want to come on again just to talk about stuff, anything going on, you got any projects you're working on, just let me know. You know how to get a hold of me.
Always working on a lot of stuff, man. Actually, I got a buddy in Chicago that's I'm kind of helping with right now that's working on a 4-part mini documentary series about mental health issues. PTSD, you know, childhood traumas, adult traumas, anxiety, depression, things of that nature, because we feel that it's something that, you know, not a lot of people are really addressing in this country. We have a lot of people that have mental health issues that, you know, we just throw pills at. Here, take this and don't worry about it. And we ignore it. And these are serious problems. You know, it's not as easy as telling a person to get over something. You know, that's not how it works. You can't just reprogram your brain by saying, hey, get over it.
Right.
So I'm trying to help him with that because I think it's an important issue.
Absolutely.
Still trying to be involved.
I actually have PTSD, so I'm totally behind you on that.
Yeah, I struggle with my own demons. I've had depression my whole life. It's a never-ending battle. You have to learn to find your ways to deal with it, but it's a constant struggle. And I'm also trying to continue to work in TV and film. I'm working closely with a friend of mine out in LA, David Elliott, who created Proven Innocent. Trying to come up with some other shows. I'm trying to get started on my book. I want to write my book this year. So I'm just working on a lot of different projects.
All right,
trying to stay busy, trying to do some good stuff.
You have an open invitation. Anytime you want to stop by, just let me know, but we'll keep in touch. If you don't mind, I hope we can keep in touch. Yeah. So thank you. I'm going to have to wrap it up. I'm done. I can't believe 4 hours I survived. I'm alive, everyone. I managed to make it. So 2 minutes left. So I'm going to say goodbye to Jason. And again, we'll talk soon. And then everybody has to get ready to go over to Andrew's channel. And Andrew is going to have, I don't even know who Andrew Hall has on. I think he's told me a few times. He has some DNA people on, I think, and some other stuff going on. So a couple of people said they'd love to hear more from you in the future. And do you have a title for the book? Someone just asked too.
Working title is Rebel with a Cause.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, you'll definitely have to let me know when that to look for that. And there's the link to the next segment.
It's a work in progress.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. Eventually.
Right.
But again, thank you.
I'll definitely let you know.
Awesome. Thank you. So thanks again to Jason and to Ricky and to Doreen and to Sandy, which seems like forever ago that I talked to Sandy. Thank you for a lot of good guests. Thanks to everybody in the chat for being awesome supporters, viewers, great questions. And I am gonna, someone let me know when Andrew starts so I don't cut off early. That was one of my rules, no dead air. There's no dead air in this 48 hours.
Right. So, well, I just want to thank you again, and thanks for everybody that tuned in. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed being on. So thank you very much.
You're a great guest. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. And stay healthy.
Oh, yeah. You too. Bye.